listening to the Crosscheck NHL Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Crosscheck NHL Show. Thanks for making the Crosscheck NHL Show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We're free and available on all platforms, now including YouTube. My name is Mary Clarke, staff writer for The Win, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mary C. Clarke. I'm here with Andrew Berkshire, NHL analyst for the Montreal Gazette and host of Game Over Montreal on the SDPN, who you can follow on Twitter at Andrew Berkshire. On this Tuesday edition of the Crosscheck, the conference finals are here. Only 4 teams remain in the playoffs as we've hit the halfway point. Andrew and I will preview both the Western and Eastern Conference Finals, as well as checking in on which teams have been the biggest disappointments so far. So, Andrew, before we start off today's show, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Had a good weekend here. You know, the boys are happy. It was nice outside. We went to parks. It's just a good time. I am glad that the second round is finally over. I am glad that the Rangers Hurricane series is finally over. I'm tired of watching paint dry.
The one that lasted the longest was the one we thought was the most boring. No offense to either of those teams.
It makes sense, right?
But, you know, after such a great first round, the second round kind of ended in a bit of a whimper. And even game 7 wasn't like, you know, the Rangers took that early lead and it was just kind of fell over from there, really. So there really was no excitement for the most part.
Honestly, I think the second round was a bit of a disappointment. The Battle of Alberta was fun, but too short. Calgary just folded way too quickly. Markstrom was too bad. And the Battle of Florida was terrible. Florida was awful. The Lightning were great, but you know, mostly that series came down to Vasilevskiy being spectacular and Florida being unable to get over the hump. You know, 1 power play goal, awful. But the second round, I hope the third round's better than the second round. That's all I got to say. The first round was fantastic.
Yeah, the first round was fantastic. Second round, bit of a mixed bag, hit or miss kind of thing. I hope the third round delivers. But yeah, my weekend was good. It was Memorial Day weekend here in the States. So I had a long weekend. It was great. I usually have Friday and Saturday off. So I had my normal Friday, Saturday off. And Saturday, I went to a friend's wedding and it was really fun. Got to see a lot of friends I haven't seen in a while. Just really great. Just good to catch up. Lots of, you know, good food, you know, good drinks, good dancing, all that stuff. It's a wedding. Then Sunday, I came back and I drove a few of my friends home, so I got to catch up more with them. But then I worked only like a handful of hours on Sunday night, and then Monday was Memorial Day, so I only worked basically like a half day on Monday. So I had a longer weekend than I usually do. So I'm feeling rested, relaxed. I'm ready to go for the third round. I'm very glad that the series got extended one more, like the Hurricanes Rangers series got extended one more day because it gave me an extra day to work on all of my preview content for the conference finals. So thank you for that at least. But yeah, things are looking good. Unfortunately though, we have to start out this episode. We're not going to make it a full segment, but this news dropped, I believe, Thursday after we recorded the show, Andrew. So there wasn't really much we could do in terms of like talking about this, but we wanted to mention it briefly. Another Rick Westhead piece came out talking about Hockey Canada and the CHL settled a lawsuit over an alleged sexual assault involving, I believe, 8 World Junior players. I believe we don't know the identity of the players, but there's a bit of confusion, at least from what I remember seeing, over which teams it comes from, because in Rick Westhead's piece, it says the 2017-18 World Junior team, and then one of these statements that came out, I believe it may have been the NHL's, that mentioned just the 2018 Canadian World Junior hockey team or like under 20 World Junior hockey team. So we're not, at least as far as I'm aware, we're not sure exactly which team it is.
It's just a different way of referring to the same team. So it is the World Junior team, which is under 20, and the 2017-18 team is like, it's the 2018.
It's just a little bit confusing. There's
too
many.
It's confused messaging, but it is that team. But I think one thing that we need to be clear about is I believe it said that it was players including but not limited to that team but they were CHL players specifically, I think. We're not going to go through the list and like name names because I feel like that's irresponsible, but a lot of people on Twitter obviously are going through that roster, and it's a lot of high profile NHLers who could currently potentially be implicated here. This is unbelievably awful, and when you read the details of it, which I encourage everyone to do, and please follow Rick Westhead on Twitter and read his articles on tsn.ca, because he is the guy who is continually chasing after these stories and bringing them to light. But the details are shocking. These kids, for lack of a better term, under 20, young people, they knew what they were doing. They knew it was wrong, and the details of the case are very clear in that. There's no argument that they mistook consent.
Yeah.
They knew that it was sexual assault. It is so disgusting, Mary, like reading this. I don't want to dwell on it too long because I don't think we can really bring anything to it at this point in time that isn't already out there. I know that the Steve Dangle podcast is bringing on Rick Westhead this week to talk about it, so I encourage everyone to tune into that, and he can give detail of where this case is going and what's going to happen. I know that it was settled in terms of they paid the young girl off.
I believe it was, or at least from what I saw in the article, asked a judge to reward $3.55 million.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything else about numbers, so I would assume that's the settlement. But yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of number is pretty large for a case like this, which tells you exactly how bad it is. Like reading through it, I was so angry. I could barely see. It's so disgusting, and I'm so tired of hockey pushing this stuff under the rug. The fact that this happened 4 years ago and we're just hearing about it now, I'm so mad. I can't stand this crap anymore, and I'm laughing to stop myself from like rage tears.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, Andrew. It's a completely horrific story. Read, if you can, if this stuff is triggering to you, you do not have to, but it is out there. You should read this reporting, share it with the correct trigger warnings and stuff like that. So, but yeah, we wanted to bring this to attention because Rick Westhead is continuing to do the most incredible, important work in hockey, the most important work in hockey. And what was it around this time last year when the Kyle Beach stuff really started to like become known and stuff like that, if I'm remembering correctly. So the story likely isn't going away. As we say with all of these stories that have come up, it seems that the floodgates are continuing to open for the NHL, and hopefully consequences and stuff will be doled out and such, because it's reprehensible to think that players on teams that you cheer for could have done something like this. So I hope, we know eventually who it is, because they shouldn't be playing hockey in the NHL anymore, regardless of whether or not they play for your favorite team. So, but I think we're going to leave it at that. But obviously we will update this story. It sucks to do so. I know. I say this like every other week. It feels like with this or just something else the NHL disappoints us in. But I wanted to get that out there, so we, talked a little bit about it and, made sure everybody was aware of it, because this is an important story and it isn't going to go away.
No.
But
I'm sure they'll try to make it go away, but at least the NHL has announced an investigation right away. So I think people should just prepare themselves for relatively large profile names to be named, and it might affect one of your favorite players. That's all.
Yeah. All right. Hard turn out of that. It's never easy to do so. Well, we're going to do it. So, all right. The playoffs, everybody. The playoffs are halfway over, like I said. And we're going to swing right into the Western Conference because I think this is going to be the more fun matchup of the two that 100%. We have left, because it is the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers. The Avalanche getting over the hump, exercising their demons, and getting to the third round for the first time in at least over a decade or so, I believe, maybe like for the first time since the early 2000s. So it's
Might
been a
have been
while.
since the last time they won the cup.
Maybe. But it's been a while for this Avalanche team. They were too talented, and they were able to make it past the Blues in the second round. And then we have the Oilers, who I think kind of shocked all of us in beating the Flames. I think a lot of us had, higher expectations for that Flames team, and we're going to talk about disappointments later on in the show. But the Oilers were able to get past, despite Mike Smith having that terrible, awful goal against. It didn't seem to matter much. But yeah, we're going to get Nathan MacKinnon versus Connor McDavid in the playoffs, and I think this is going to be an incredible round of hockey. What say you, Andrew? It seems like you are also just as excited as me for this round because it seems as if this is going to be the more fun of the two.
Yeah, it's McDavid versus McKinnon, right? Like, how could you not be excited about this right now? And it's going to be the fastest hockey we've seen these playoffs, I think. The difference is, in my opinion, McDavid doesn't have Makar, right? I think Makar has been arguably the best player on the Avalanche in the postseason. I haven't been there's been people who are like, oh yeah, Edmonton's not going to be able to score at will as easily against the Colorado Avalanche. But did you see Darcy Kemper in the last series? He hasn't filled me with a lot of confidence. So I think this series is going to go the distance. I don't think it's going to be easy for the Colorado Avalanche. I think people can underestimate the Edmonton Oilers at their peril. And as much as I don't trust Mike Smith, and anyone who does trust Mike Smith is kind of crazy, Mike Smith has a career .930 save percentage in the playoffs. He's got a .927 this year. He has shut down the Calgary Flames for the most part. I know he wasn't great in that series, but he was really decent. He was better than the other goaltender. So, I don't know. Maybe Mike Smith's the better goalie in this series. It could
wild
happen
to think of, Andrew, because, yeah, Mike Smith's playoff numbers are just weird. It feels like such an anomaly to me. It feels like we've talked about how Mike Smith oscillates between being either the best goaltender ever or the worst goaltender ever, and there's no real in between with him. And for some reason in the playoffs, he is on the best goaltender ever, but the Oilers haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs before. But now the team seems to be playing a better structure of hockey. There's, more talent around McDavid. And, as loath we are to talk about Evander Kane, he's, I believe leading the NHL playoff field in goals. So yeah, it is, this Oilers team is different, and it shows. And the fact that Mike Smith could very well win the goaltending battle, in this series, and has won the goaltending battle in their series so far, is just really surprising to me. I mean, coming into the playoffs, he went 8-0, 9-0 in the last little bit of the regular season, in the last month. So we maybe should have seen this coming, but regular season success does not always transfer to the postseason. Talk to the Florida Panthers or the Calgary Flames. We will get to both of those teams at the end of this segment, or at the end of this podcast. But it's just Mike Smith is such an anomaly to me. What a weird goaltender he is.
He's so strange. You watch him, and even when he's playing well, he looks like he's playing terrible.
Yes.
He'll have a good game, and then he'll let in that shot from the opposing blue line. It's just awful. But the craziest thing about this series is we talk about McKinnon and Makar versus McDavid and Draisaitl. And I think that's going to be a matchup for the ages. And McKinnon and Makar bring a defensive quality that the Oilers' top guys don't. But at the same time, as great as McKinnon and Makar are, they are tied with 13 points in the playoffs. McDavid and Draisaitl have 26.
Yep.
It's double.
Yeah, it's double. They're approaching historic numbers, or they have historic numbers. I believe I looked this up for the content I was writing, that both of them have a higher points per, a 2 something points per game, which only was matched by Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux in previous playoffs. So they are in a historic tier of their own right now. It's incredible what they're doing. I really hope that this series doesn't disappoint in the way the Battle of Alberta / the Battle of Florida did, because we hyped those series up so much, Andrew.
And they fell flat.
And they fell flat because the Panthers weren't the Panthers, and their scoring disappeared, and they couldn't score on the power play. And Jacob Markstrom just wasn't as good as advertised, basically, and the Flames kind of got shut down from there. But if this series was to disappoint, Andrew, where could it go wrong? Basically, like where, like do the Avalanche just completely overwhelm the Oilers with their experience and better structure, or could the Oilers overrun the Avalanche with their superior offense? Like, where could it go wrong here? Could you possibly see this series being as bad as those? Or are we trying to, not even think about that because we want it to be good?
I think there's a possibility that either team could see their goaltending fall out from underneath them, right? Like if Kemper plays against the Oilers like he played against the Blues, that could spell serious trouble for the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avalanche are good enough that even if Kemper is not great, they can still win a series, as they just showed. Like, remember when we talked on this show, all they needed to win Game 6 or Game 5 or Game 7 against the Blues was Kemper to play one good game. He did not do that. They still won. So they could do that against the Edmonton Oilers, possibly. But I think he needs to be a little bit better than he was, just because the Oilers are just so dangerous. But, Mike Smith could also turn into a pumpkin, as he has many times before, and the Avalanche could run them out of the building very quickly. This series has boom or bust potential, just like the Battle of Alberta did, just like the Battle of Florida did. I hope we get a boom and not a bust. I would love to see this go 7 games, just because I think that the opportunity for greatness in viewer watchability is so high.
Yeah, it felt
I'm
like
not 100% confident though.
Yeah, same. I mean, it felt like the second round, really just, you're right, it busted in terms of the first round was, we had how many game sevens? 6 game
5.
sevens out of, okay, there we go. 5 game sevens out of 8 series. That's a lot. That's a lot of excitement. There was a lot of, drama.
And
turmoil.
didn't 3 go to overtime in Game 7?
I believe so, or something like that.
You
It
don't
was,
get better than that.
yeah, it feels like we haven't had a really long grinding overtime in a while too. I mean, yeah, the first round usually is the best in terms of just there's so much happening, so there's more room for chaos, more room for all that type of stuff. But it's just a shame that the second round didn't really live up to the hype, but it can here. It can at least maybe we should, temper our expectations a little more reasonably. But I still think that there is a good series here underneath it all, because these are 2 really good teams. And I mean, the Oilers have their problems. We've talked about them. I still wasn't convinced on their goaltending. It looks like it could have possibly been a problem early on, but Mike Smith seems to have figured it out for now. But there's always there's that ever-present potential that he turns back into a pumpkin. It's never gone with Mike Smith. He'll never it's always it's like a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing. Right now he's playing the good Dr. Jekyll, but there's always the possibility that Hyde comes out to play. That's such a bad metaphor, but we're gonna go with it. So yeah, I guess we will end this segment with predictions, because that is what we do. And I was terrible last round because I keep my predictions the same between this podcast and the one I do at work, because consistency. I don't know. I don't want to seem two-faced and all of that. So last round I only went 1 for 4. It was bad. I only had, who did I have as the only team going out? Oh, the Avalanche is the only team progressing. I don't remember if we had the same predictions, Andrew, but I will ask you for yours first for this series, because I'm curious, and yeah, I'm just curious. So what's your prediction, Andrew?
I think the Avalanche take it. I still think they win the cup this year, and they're the only team that I can see beating Tampa Bay at this point. So I have to go with the Colorado Avalanche.
Do you have a game in mind?
7. I think it's going to go the distance. I love the potential of this series. I want it to go 7. I'm picking with my heart, not my head, which is what I've been doing the whole playoffs. I don't care if I'm right. It's just for fun.
It's just for fun. I agree. But yes, I also have the Avalanche in 7. I can absolutely see this going to the Oilers just as easily, because if, Mike Smith wins the goalie battle against Darcy Kemper, that might spell doom for Colorado. But, good on both of these teams for, making it to the third round. I mean, we didn't really talk about how Edmonton hasn't really made it. This is Connor McDavid's first trip to the conference final.
Yeah, so it's the first time since 2002 when Patrick Waugh did the Statue of Liberty thing against Detroit for Colorado, and the first time since 05-06 for the Edmonton Oilers. So both times these teams made it. For Colorado, it was kind of the end of the era, the second last season for Patrick Waugh. And for Edmonton, it was the last time they made the Stanley Cup final, and they got within one game of winning the Stanley Cup that year.
Yeah, and I think this is good. Like we're getting some new blood, as it were, in the later rounds. Like we've had Edmonton and Colorado in the playoffs in the early rounds, but they haven't really progressed this far since at least close to 20 years, essentially 20 years and close to 20 years for both of these teams. Yeah, like this is hopefully going to be a good series. There's obviously a lot on the line here, not just in terms of like advancing to the Stanley Cup final, but like it's been a long time for these teams, and they're sure to know that, even though obviously none of those players were on any of those teams. But it's still probably a weight on their shoulders that they know that the history of their cities and their teams, they've had a long drought in terms of getting to this late in the playoffs, and there's still a couple more steps for them to go to reach Stanley Cup greatness. But we're going to end the segment there, and we're going to transition to the Eastern Conference. Going to talk about an intriguing series, a series I don't know if many of us would have predicted coming out of the second round, but we will talk about that coming up right after this. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. RockAuto.com is a family business serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. The RockAuto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brands, specifications, and prices you prefer. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thank you for making the Crosscheck NHL show your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Andrew. So moving on to the Eastern Conference Final. We have, of course, for the third year in a row, the Tampa Bay Lightning, everybody.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Woo boy. And facing them with the Herculean task of trying to knock out the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, the New York Rangers. We'll start with the Rangers first because that game is fresh in my mind. They bested the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 7. It wasn't a particularly close game, and that was even before Antti Raanta got injured and left in probably like midway through the game, approximately. Yeah, it wasn't pretty for the Hurricanes. We might talk about them a little bit in our final segment, talking about disappointments, but the Rangers were able to take advantage of a Hurricanes team that had not nearly as good goaltending and also who couldn't score on the power play. And the Rangers took advantage. I don't know if you wanted to, speak a little bit about Game 7 before we get in, but it ties directly into the Rangers because I want to talk about them first. They're, I think, my biggest surprise for getting into this conference final for sure. But what say you, Andrew?
I am not a fan of the Rangers, but I just read quickly that Braden Point is still not expected to play in this round. He's progressing, but he has an uncertain return to the playoffs this year, which is bad for the Lightning. I still think the Lightning win this series in 6 because I'm just not super impressed with the Rangers overall. And Igor Shesterkin is an absolute game changer, but he's up against the only guy in the world who might be better than him.
Oh, yeah.
So this is going to probably be a super low scoring series, which sucks, but it'll be a great goaltending performance series, which is good if you're a goalie person, which I am, but I'd like them to be tested more. I don't really see an avenue for the Rangers to win this unless the Lightning, actually get tired. And the fact that they swept the last series, now they're rested. Man, I don't see how they're going to pull that out. It's going to be really, really tough. I will say that I think Adam Fox is probably the best defenseman in the playoffs so far, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been really, really great. And yeah, props to this Rangers team for getting this far. I know people have been talking about them, and I mentioned last night on Twitter during Game 7 that the Rangers are basically this year's Canadians, except they're instead of it being first line centers being injured, it is goalies being injured.
Yes, and
Because
that's the funny thing. Nobody's discrediting the Rangers in the way that the Canadians were last year. Last year, it was like an avalanche of it. And I know part of it's because they eliminated Toronto and Toronto dominates media, but very few people are talking about the fact that the Rangers are actually much more fortunate than the Canadians were last year. It's one thing to lose a
I think
center.
it's because the Canadians were what
18th?
18th.
Yeah,
And
but the
the
Rangers,
Rangers
be real here.
are.
The Rangers, like,
It's the public perception. The Rangers,
yes, but the Rangers
were
weren't
one
good in
of
the
the
regular
better
season
teams,
either.
but they were one of the better teams in the Metropolitan Division, regardless of whether or not they were
In
actually a good
record,
team.
yeah.
Yes, but that it's the public perception, Andrew. Not all hockey fans are going to, dive deep into the numbers like we
This is
do.
true.
So you are getting the surface level thing. It is obvious, when you have the 18th best team beating other really much better teams. They seemed and getting good luck along the way to getting to the Stanley Cup final. And then you have a team like the Rangers, who were one of the better teams by record in the Metropolitan Division. I'm not really defending the Rangers here, but I'm just talking to you from, I guess, a casual's perspective. You're
Yes,
not
for
going to
sure.
get as much uproar over it because the Rangers were all year long one of the top 3 teams in the Metropolitan Division by record, and also have a goalie who is in contention for the Hart and the Vezina. So that helps, I think.
It definitely does. And I think, Kreider having a 50-goal
Yeah,
season.
that helps too.
Yeah.
It
It's just
feels like
funny because
it is funny.
the Rangers this year in the playoffs are worse than the Canadians were last year, which I find very
funny.
interesting.
That is very funny.
Their expected goal score percentage at 5-on-5 is 39.7%. That is brutal.
And one of my questions in this segment was if, the Rangers are as big of a paper tiger as we thought, or are they actually good? Or are they benefiting from those injuries? But it seems like, Andrew, you are still on the side that they are playing a bit above their weight class.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the playoffs, I want to give credit to every team who goes far, even if it is riding luck, because you still have to accomplish that, right? You still have to push it. You still have to take advantage of your opportunities, and the Rangers have done that. They could have folded when the Penguins were up. I think the Penguins were up 3-1.
I think so.
Sure, Trouba managed to injure Crosby, and then they were still playing against a third string goaltender, but they could have lost to the Carolina Hurricanes. That's a good team. Even with Antti Ranta, Antti Ranta's a backup goalie, but he's still a good goalie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Rangers have earned their spot. It's just that I don't think they have any chance of beating the Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in my previews for the win that the Lightning are the final boss of the
For
playoffs.
everyone.
They're the final boss. Epic music and all, One Winged Angel playing in the background. So they are the final boss here. And it's going to take a lot to dethrone them. And the Rangers have some good pieces, have maybe the only goalie that could possibly be on par with Vasilevskiy, have, the best defenseman in these playoffs and Adam Fox, have, Chris Kreider playing absolutely out of his mind. Just, what a season for him it's been. But with all that being said, this is the Tampa Bay Lightning, the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. Even without Braden Point, they were able to dismantle the Florida Panthers, who, yes, I know, were not looking like themselves, but they are well-rested, and they have got the best goalie in these playoffs, bar none, in Vasilevskiy. And, we know his numbers in elimination games, when the team's backs is against the wall in game 7s. We know how good he is. And he's just stone cold. Like there is what will it take to beat this guy? I don't know if the Rangers have it, but yeah, I think this is the Lightning series here. I cannot see, unless for some reason the Rangers are able to get Vasilevskiy off his game. That is the only way I can see this happening, even without Braden Point, who is a big cog in the machine of the Lightning. But it's so hard it's so hard to beat this Lightning team. And, by all rights, they should be tired. By all rights, they should be a weaker team too. Like, the salary cap crunch really hit them. They lost one of their major lines coming into this season, one of the beating hearts of this team. And they've still been able to get through and persevere to the conference final. And, they should be tired. They really should be, considering like they played so many games, played more games than anyone else in the NHL over the last couple of years. Like the cards should be stacked against them, but they just seem to come out stronger every time. And I can't help but respect it. I know, like I said, that they are the final boss, the main villain of the NHL right now, but I cannot help but respect what they do, because they have just built an incredible organization with, smart management and stuff like that. But yeah, this feels like, I think I also said it's Thanos going, I am inevitable. I know what happens to Thanos after that, but it feels like that point in, Avengers Endgame when he goes, I am inevitable. Again, like I said, I know what happens to him after that, but it really does feel like the Lightning are inevitable. But I'm willing to be surprised here. But I think you were right that this is probably going to be a, if the Avalanche and Oilers are the all offense, goaltending optional, this is the all goaltending offense optional series. They're two complete opposites.
All defense.
Yes, they're two complete opposites. And funnily enough, Andrew, you also said Lightning in 6. That is what I have. So we're going to ride or die with these predictions, it feels like, on this podcast. So yeah. Anything else you want to say about this series before we move on to some playoff disappointments?
Yeah, I just saw a tweet a little while ago that was asking who has the best jersey of the teams remaining.
Ooh.
And if we were talking about regular season jerseys, or like picking the best jersey from each team, I think it's very, very easily the Oilers. But they insist on wearing those god-awful navy practice jerseys. And I have to say, this might be one of the worst conference final jersey collections ever. I know some people love the Rangers and the sideways lettering. I find it so
you're not a fan
boring.
of like
Not a fan. I think it's the worst original 6 jersey aside from the racist one.
No. I've always liked script jerseys. It reminds me of college hockey, and I've talked about my roots as a journalist are in college hockey, so it brings me some nostalgia, and I hate to be nostalgic for my own college tenure because it really wasn't that long ago. But yeah, I get it. If I had to, pick, I would pick the Rangers Lightning as the better jersey, matchup, because they're both blue and my favorite color is blue. So I'm biased. I'm sorry. But yeah, that is, I hate that the Oilers are wearing those jerseys. What is the point? They're just so bad. They're so bad. They're so bad. And I don't like the Avalanche's away jerseys because of the weird blue lettering on them. It's weird. I don't like it.
It's so close to being good.
It's so close to being perfect, and they've tweaked it in the wrong direction, basically. Yep. Like don't do that. But yeah. But yeah, that is our conference final playoff preview. I'm not surprised that Andrew that we have the same picks, but I'm sorry to both the Avalanche and the Lightning for dooming them, because this always happens to me. But yeah, we're going to go into our next segment and talk about playoff disappointments. And I might be adding the Carolina Hurricanes to that list, but we will talk about that coming up right after this. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments this year, including basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, Andrew. So, playoff disappointments. We've had a handful of them in these playoffs. I first want to start with my biggest disappointment is the Florida Panthers. One, because poor Claude Giroux doesn't deserve any of this. I can't believe they did my boy dirty like that. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the biggest playoff disappointment because they had the best offense, were the President's Trophy winners, and were swept out of the playoffs by the Lightning. Didn't really show much of a fight. Didn't really look like themselves at all. I mean, maybe this was the real Panthers all along. I don't know. But like, even though they made it to the second rounds, their wins against the Capitals weren't convincing. They were, their strength was their ability to, make comebacks and stuff like that. And while they did do that in the Capitals series, it never felt like they were playing from a position of strength at all. So the Florida Panthers, at least for me, my biggest playoff disappointment so far, because I expected a lot of things from them, and being swept out of the playoffs puts you number one in my book. So what about you, Andrew?
It makes for bad podcasting, but I agree with you. It's strange to say that a team that made it out of the first round is the biggest disappointment, but the Florida Panthers, as they were playing in the regular season, should have swept the Washington Capitals, and they did not even play well against them. They barely made it out of that series, even though they won in 6 games. And then
it was more on the strength of their overall talent,
skill level.
Skill level.
They played on talent, not as a team, really. And really, Carter Verhaeghe was the guy. Like, all playoffs for them, he was their best player, which is crazy because, listen, he's a good player, really good player. But if he's your best player, that's an issue.
It's not going to do it.
It's not going to do it. And I think there's a lot of questions that should be surrounding Jonathan Huberdeau right now. I think there's a lot of questions around their defense. And obviously their goaltending is a question because it's super expensive. And, when does Spencer Knight take over? I know he didn't have a great season this year, but a lot of questions in Florida right now. I think that there are a lot of folks who think that they are in a great position to just run it back. And they don't really have a choice in that, but they have a very limited cap window to get this team over the hump. And this year was not encouraging at all.
And I feel like I talked about this, but this feels like the biggest missed opportunity here of these teams that we'll talk about. This feels probably like the biggest missed opportunity.
I think you could say the same thing about the Flames.
Interesting. I mean, there's a point of, a lot of Flyers fans really want Johnny Gaudreau to come home this offseason. I don't think it's going to happen, but there's talk of splitting up the core in Calgary, and that's a good point.
I don't think Gaudreau's going to leave, but I don't think he's going to get any cheaper either.
Yeah.
Right? So they have Johnny Gaudreau as a UFA. He's their only real big one, but
Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk and Andrew Mangiapane are restricted free agents at 24 and 26 years old. Those guys are due for massive paydays.
Yeah.
So the Flames are at a precipice here where they have to figure out what they can actually keep together. This might have been their best overall chance to win the cup.
And they threw away such great seasons from that top line.
Yeah.
It's really a shame because they were one of the best lines in the NHL for a good portion of the season. And they just weren't able to put it together at the end of the day. And, Jacob Markstrom, I don't think he was a Vezina finalist, but he was up there. Like
he should have been a Vezina finalist.
He should have been. I think Freddie Anderson took his spot, if I remember. But he was up there. He really was for a good portion of the season. Probably should have been a Vezina finalist, but was one of the better goaltenders this year. And just
he was a nominee. It's Shesterkin, Saros, and Markstrom. So
so it was Freddie Anderson. I flipped it in my head. So it was Freddie Anderson was the one that fell out. All right, but so yeah, he was a Vezina candidate, and it just didn't materialize. I mean, we talked about in the Star Series how he was able to match the incredible performance of Jake Ottinger and beat it, and here he just wasn't. I don't know what it was. I mean, goalies are weird voodoo and stuff like that. So who am I to say what's gone wrong? But he just did not look like himself. He really didn't. And The Oilers were able to put more pressure on him than anybody else so far in these playoffs, and he just kind of crumbled. And I mean, he's still a really good goalie. It doesn't all lie at Markstrom's feet here for me. But it
No.
is
They
probably like
also left him
their
out to dry a lot of that series as
yeah,
well.
but it's at least their biggest glaring thing coming out of that
Yeah.
playoffs for me.
And Markstrom has, I think, 4 years left.
Mhm.
So I understand why Sutter didn't make the switch, because there's like next year to think about as well. But I think taking Markstrom out in one of those games in Edmonton and letting Vladar have a full game might have allowed Markstrom to reset a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, it's very easy to look back in hindsight and say this was a bad decision. But also, I'm going to look back and say this was a bad decision. Like, I feel like Daryl Sutter was a little bit too stoic in that series, just expecting that his team from the regular season would resurface and dominate play.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, they held court at even strength. They were the better team at even strength, but they could not defend in front of Markstrom, and he could not save any of the high quality opportunities that the Edmonton Oilers were creating. And I think the Calgary Flames are not going to be as good next year, just because they're going to have to move out pieces in order
Yeah,
to
it's gonna be
fit things
tough to
under.
recreate that magic that they
It
had
is.
this year. And going from one Canadian team to another, I
Yep.
put the Maple Leafs on this list.
Yep.
Even though for me, this loss feels not more acceptable, but not nearly as embarrassing as their previous Game 7 losses, but they still lost in Game 7.
Yeah. It's the compounding of it, right?
It is. And I
It's
mean, wasting away Austin Matthews' incredible season.
Yep.
This was probably their best team that they had put together in a very long time. And they still faltered at the end. Sure, they gave the Lightning everything they had and then some. It's not nearly as embarrassing or as apocalyptic, essentially, as their previous Game 7 losses, where it was they either bowed out in embarrassing fashion to the Canadians, or just like it's really those losses against the Canadians and the Blue Jackets that are the big things here. And I guess also the Bruins at one time, but like yeah, this is just another Maple Leafs disappointment. And they also are facing down decisions of, what their roster is going to look like. I mean,
Yeah.
I know they
How
got
can they
Jason
keep things
Spezza.
together?
I know they got Jason Spezza back for a premium. Not Jason Spezza, he retired. Mark Giordano back for a premium. Jason Spezza retired. There we go. Just flipped him in my head.
I would
But
say Giordano back for like a big deal, not so
Mhm.
much a premium, right? I think
Mhm.
he's making $800,000, which I thought that was lower than the league minimum.
Really?
Isn't the league minimum $975 now?
I thought it was $750.
I thought it was above that.
Maybe
Because
it's changed.
when you send somebody down, you get the league minimum back of their contract and cap space, right? And that was like $975K this year, I thought.
Mhm.
So maybe it's like if you're over 35, you can sign for less. Maybe
Maybe.
there's a league minimum only on.
I don't know the full intricacies of the
Yeah.
CBA and stuff like that, but
But the one saving grace that the Leafs have is that like Michael Bunting has another year left at 950K. They've got some cheap players in there. Kyle Clifford is really cheap right now, which gives them a roster player, I guess.
Mhm.
But like Wayne Simmons, does he play next year?
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions going on there. David Kampf is also relatively cheap. He was great in the playoffs, I thought. Like there's a lot more structure for the Leafs than there is in Calgary, where like Calgary has a lot of their big players up for contract,
Mhm.
whereas the Leafs, it's like everything around the margins, which is how they are almost every year. Like their biggest question is like, are they going to lose Ilya Mikheyev? And like,
Mhm.
probably. Will they find another Ilya Mikheyev almost immediately? Yes.
That's just kind of how the NHL is. It's got
Yeah.
like a bunch of fringe players that you're able to, mix and match and put together and stuff like that. But Maple Leafs also fall squarely in that disappointment camp. Because this by all rights, this should have been their year. It really
Yep.
should have been.
When Point went down in Game 7, they should have taken it over, and they never did.
Yeah, they weren't able to do it. And the last team, I'll put the Hurricanes in here. I'll say it.
Yes.
I'll put the Hurricanes in here. I know
Another team that needed to do something this year.
I know that they had goaltending issues. Freddie Anderson didn't play at all in the playoffs, and that sucks. to have both Ronta and Anderson go down the way they did at the end of the regular season, and put their goalies in jeopardy. And Freddie Anderson never came back, and Ronta just obviously got injured in Game 7, but wasn't really holding up at the end of the series. But it's their power play that disappointed. I think they scored like 6 goals or whatever in total in the postseason. Had at least the last time I checked, it was like a 12% power play percentage. It's not great. It's not great at all. And I know that the Hurricanes make their strength on defensive structure, but I think that they need to find a way, much like the Islanders, they need to find a way to have some offense. Get a few more finishers on this team, or at least one more finisher, because it just seems like they couldn't, score when needed, and their defense let them down, and they were put in a situation where they're not often in, where their defensive structure breaks down and their goalies aren't able to stop pucks. They need to score. They're a team that likes to, win 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever. And they just weren't able to do that in this series. But for me, it was a disappointing one, especially with the way that it played out by the end.
Yeah, it was a team that didn't have any excuse.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Igor Shesterkin is good. No disrespect to him at all. But the Carolina Hurricanes had to get over this hump, much like the Maple Leafs. They've been knocking at the door now for 4 years. They're a team we all know is extremely good. They did not play well in the playoffs. They didn't win a single road game.
Oh,
Come on.
Yeah, that's that. And they finally lost a home game at the worst time. So, it was disappointing from the Hurricanes here. That'll at least wrap up, I think, our talks on disappointments. We could possibly revisit this next once the conference finals are over, because someone is probably going to disappoint here, I am sure. It always happens. But coming up next, we're going to finish off the episode with our pop culture roulette segment. And I think we have a lot to talk about, Andrew, because a lot of stuff came out. So, buckle up and prepare, because spoilers are going to be ahead. That'll be coming up right after this. You've been asking, and Built delivered. Built granola bars are here. Built granola bars come in 3 unbelievable flavors: chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. Want to try all 3 flavors? You can get a mix box at built.com right now. These are so different from the bars and the puffs. Built granola bars are loaded with granola. It's the perfect combination of crunch and chewiness. But just like bars and puffs, these babies are packed with protein and covered in 100% real chocolate. With 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, and only 4 grams of sugar, Built granola bars will change your world. Built has cracked the code to better granola. They're the perfect healthy snack to pack in your lunch, take on the road, or eat as a snack. And they're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. So if you've been waiting for a healthy and delicious granola bar to hit the market, this is your time. Head to built.com right now to get the Built granola bars. 3 delicious flavors to try: chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, and white chocolate berry. Don't miss out. You got to get yours today. Go to built.com to get Built granola bars now. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Andrew. So, heading off this episode, before we, move on with our day and such, is our pop culture segment. And like I said, there was a lot of pop culture that came out over the weekend. We got 2 episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, new series on Disney Plus, and the entire first part of the next season of Stranger Things. And I have completed both of them. I didn't think I was going to be able to do all of Stranger Things, but then I realized I had more free time on my hands than I thought once I came back from the wedding. So I was able to plow through that with ease. So I have both to talk about. I have no idea. I assume you watched both episodes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, so they'll probably be the thing we talk about the most here. I don't know how far you got into Stranger Things, and I don't know if you have anything else on your list of things to talk about, Andrew, but that is what I've got. But we'll start with Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that is the bigger deal. What did you think, Andrew? And how cute is spoilers here?
Spoilers, yes.
How cute is a 10-year-old Princess Leia?
So cute. And first of all, Star Wars fandom is so goddamn toxic. It is unbelievable how vicious people are being the fact that Star Wars had to tweet, "Don't be racist."
Mhm.
So far this series, I'm actually pretty into it. I am biased here in that this is what I wanted in the first place, but I like that the first episode was basically showing a broken Obi-Wan Kenobi who is kind of a piece of shit
Mhm.
that doesn't really feel the pull to help people, that has isolated himself, that has trauma. I think this is an extremely interesting take on the character. The only one that I really wanted to see. I didn't want to see sly, jokey Obi-Wan from the prequels because that wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. It's like the thing that bothers me the most about The Last Jedi, right, is that at the end of it, when so many of the resistance in that movie, yeah, I think it's the resistance, have died, and they're basically on the ropes against the First Order, and they're all like laughing and joking as they fly off in the Millennium Falcon. It's like, what?
Mhm.
Why are they so happy right now? I understand they escaped, but like, it should be a little bit more somber, like the end of Empire, where like, yeah, there's some hope there, but nobody's smiling and laughing, right? Luke gets his robot hand and they're all kind of sad. That's the end of the movie with like a sprinkle of hope.
Mhm.
So I think they didn't land that there. They seem to be on the right track here. I knew as soon as I watched the second episode that there's going to be a ton of people who are like, oh man, little Leia's so annoying. And they're all going to be people who don't have kids, because little Leia is just an accurate kid, an
Mhm.
accurate, strong willed kid. And I love her. I hope there's
Yes.
more of her. I am very here for it. I love that they have a bit of a relationship that explains why she trusts Luke immediately when he mentions Obi-Wan at the beginning of A New Hope.
Mhm.
I am very into where this series is going. I wish it was more than 6 episodes. Very hyped to see Hayden Christensen back with Obi-Wan. I think that's super fun. I watched a bunch of interviews with the two of them. Did you see the one where it was like they did like the Star Wars celebration or whatever? And
Mhm.
they're like, do you have any last moments before, or any last words before we go towards like the Obi-Wan premiere and like end this thing? And Hayden Christensen leans into his microphone and goes, this is where the fun begins.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% convinced that Hayden Christensen is a prequel memes shit poster. And you cannot convince me otherwise.
No, I mean, it checks out. It makes sense. And I'm so here for, Hayden Christensen getting the recognition he deserves. Because the prequels were not all on him. He did the best with what he could, and he did not deserve the hate that he got. Because no one does. You should not do that to people. Hayden
They're doing
Christensen,
a job.
yeah, they're doing a job. Hayden Christensen, the young girl who plays Princess Leia. No, do not do that.
Or the girl who's playing Reva as well.
That's
Who,
also true. Yeah.
or is it Reva or Reva? I think it's Reva.
I think it's Reva. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, I find the reaction to that character is predictable and disgusting. I'm actually interested in that character. I
Yeah.
think the opening flashback to Order 66 is showing us the spawn of that character.
Mhm.
When you see the little girl, I think her relationship with Obi-Wan is something that I'm interested to see going forward. The people who think that, or who've been saying that she's a bad actress, I don't know what you're talking about, other than you're probably a misogynist or a racist. I think that she's been fine. I think the fact that she's been the aggressive Inquisitor
Mhm.
is interesting. You don't like the parkour over the buildings?
I thought it was
Fine.
cool.
I thought it was fine.
I thought it was
Like, who
cool.
cares? The only thing in that series that I didn't like was the chase scene with the Leia in the forest.
Mhm.
And it wasn't because of her. It was
It's
the
because
people.
why are the adults not catching up to her? Because they should have longer legs, and
I mean,
therefore
even if they didn't catch up to her, it's like the obstacles that were stopping them were like, oh, there's a
a
tree
tree
branch
branch.
2 feet high that I can't jump over. But I feel like the part of that is like the limitations in stunt work that you can do with a 10-year-old.
Mhm.
And also, those people are wearing masks. They can't see.
Mhm.
So like they can't run full speed. So like it's
Yeah.
excusable, even though it kind of looked dumb.
Yeah, it did look dumb, I think is the biggest thing. But I mean, that's just a quibble on what is
It
so
is.
far been a really awesome series. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes next because there's a lot here. And I think they pulled a really good dupe on us. I didn't realize Princess Leia was going to be in the series. I don't know if anybody
Yeah.
did. That was probably like the best kept secret because like
there was hope, but nobody actually knew. I don't think.
yeah, I didn't think that, like, the trailers gave nothing away. I didn't think that that was going to be the hook here. I mean, we know
Yeah, they all
Obi-Wan
showed
got
young
off of
Luke, right?
yeah, and Obi-Wan, like, in the trailers, it was clear Obi-Wan gets off of Tatooine, but how, we didn't know, and I didn't realize that that was going to be the hook. I must say I love the relationship between Bail Organa and Leia. Like that whole family dynamic.
It's great.
It is really great. It fits well with Leia's character and how she grows up and who she grows up to become. It was
I'm
just really
also a
sweet.
huge fan of Jimmy Smits, so I was just really
Mhm.
happy to see him back, and I hope he's in the whole
Yeah.
series. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
love
hope so too.
him. He's
Mhm.
such a great actor. Every character that he's embodied throughout his whole career is like a fan favorite for me.
Mhm.
I love that man. He's awesome. So more Jimmy Smits, please.
Mhm. I'm very excited to see, Obi-Wan, use this lightsaber because
Yep.
like they're clearly holding off on it for the right moment, the right impact. And it's going to be, fun when he does because yeah, like I said, they're clearly saving it for stuff, and the Inquisitors are really cool. I know them from the video game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So I know that they've appeared in other Star Wars
And
properties.
Rebels, yeah.
Yeah, but I know them from that game, so, it's been cool to see, more of them, as, they play the antagonists in, not those characters, but other characters from the Inquisitors play the antagonists of that game. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, excited, to see what happens next. You're right, I wish it could be more than 6 episodes, but I hope that it's a, tightly compacted narrative that, like doesn't go too I don't think it'll go too long, but, like, it's not like it's just, like, it flows really well from one episode to the next, basically, but, so, did you get through any of Stranger Things yet?
Yes, I absolutely mainlined Stranger Things while the kids were sleeping. Uh,
Alright.
Stayed up way too late every night this weekend. So
Alright, so what did you think of, Stranger Things season 4 part 1, I suppose?
so far, it is the best thing they've done since season 1.
I think so too. I think
I
so
think
too.
it's really fantastic. The scene, like, spoilers again for anybody
Mhm.
who's watched Kenobi and hasn't watched Stranger Things, click off. The scene with Max with the Deal with God song running out, I was so tense. I was like leaning forward
Mhm.
because they have mostly avoided killing like the main characters, but they you had that moment in season 1 where you thought Will was dead, and I still
Mhm.
remember my, like, visceral reaction to that when I
Yeah.
saw it. It was so I was, like, just hoping that they wouldn't kill Max, right?
Mhm.
It was
In such a
so good.
brutally horrific way. I must
Yes.
say, I am, this season, I don't think is for the faint of heart. Okay, thankfully,
No.
after the first time, the brutal murder stuff happens. If you've seen the show, if you've seen the season, you know what I'm talking about. After you see it the first time, it's not nearly as bad, but I'm like, I don't want
It
to see any of these main cast characters end up like that. No,
Yeah.
please.
I feel like
So,
they go a little bit more cartoony with the murders as
mhm,
it goes on, which to me takes away from it a little bit because 'cause they've set the stage for it to be so visceral. But, yeah, they made the Demogorgon not so much, though. The Demogorgon is, like, more vicious than ever,
oh yeah, yeah.
so that's
I think the
that's fun.
only thing I don't not that I don't like, but I don't find as interesting has been the stuff with Elle, and it's a shame because Millie Bobby
Really?
Brown, like, is a great actress, does incredible work. I think it's just like, I don't know,
I've been less interested in the stuff in Russia. I
the
found
Russia
that just
stuff is
took too
fine.
long.
The Russia stuff is fine. The best parts for me are the stuff with, everybody back in Hawkins. Dustin, Steve,
Yes.
Robin, Nancy, all of them, incredible stuff. I would watch an entire show of just them. Max, like everybody
I
in
would
that
watch
area.
an
I would
entire
just
show of just Steve Harrington and
and
Dustin. The
them
fact
and
that
Robin,
and Ro
as
yes, of course.
the like, I love Steve and Robin's relationship so much as a
It is
person who
fantastic.
I love that because it's a duo of people who love women. So it's just like you get like that they're incredible back and forth being like, "Yeah, girls, am I right?" And I'm like, "Yes,
Yeah.
that it really is what it is like." Um So, yeah, those are my favorite parts. It's the more interesting stuff too that happens in Hawkins. I don't know. Maybe it's because, the stuff with Elle is just more of a slow burn. She has character development, obviously, but like it always seems like she's back in the same place and
Yeah, I
whatnot.
didn't
I don't know.
enjoy the stuff with Elle in California just because it's so
It's so
awful to watch her go
yeah,
through that. It just
yeah,
felt painful.
it
But
is.
once she got put into the Nina situation, she's back with
Yeah,
Brenner.
that was much better. Once, it more leaned into that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I found it better. I mean, even like,
Although,
the
did you call the reveal of one?
uh before it happened, like in that episode, yes. Before it
Okay.
happened, no.
I thought it as soon as he started telling her that Brenner was not being truthful, I was like, that's one.
Mm. Yeah, once I don't remember specifically when, but it was in that episode right before the reveal. But I'm like, oh, because I don't remember specifically what he says. But he may have said like one is like a friend or something. I don't remember specifically what he says, but like, yeah, I eventually was able to catch on to it like 5 minutes before the reveal, basically. But that's just I was just more concerned. I was like, what's gonna happen? Like, because I was like, Nancy, the older kids, Nancy, Robin, Steve, and Eddie, who I've really enjoyed as an addition to the cast. As like
Yes, I've enjoyed Eddie too.
yeah, as I love that they keep expanding that cast of characters because it's just everybody they've added is really great. I was scared for them because you're right. I was very terrified that one of them was going to die because you're right. They haven't really killed many of the main cast of characters. And it felt like that we were revving up for an opportunity to do so. So I
Yeah.
was more worried about them. So I was like, oh, please don't kill any of them because they're, like I said, my favorite part of the show. And
Also,
it
shout out to Lucas, who's like the most wholesome, awesome character, and it felt like they were taking him away from that at the beginning, and then you
mhm.
just see
He's like the
how,
most sensible character. Like the stuff at
yeah,
the beginning with all the teenage drama stuff. He felt like the most sensible character. I know he like fell in with the, basketball, I guess satanic panic crowd as it has been crowned as, because it's
but he got
related
out
to
of there so
he
fast
he
as soon
got
as
out
he
of there so
realized, right?
fast, so good for him. Like I said, probably the most sensible character, of the bunch in terms of just, like, how realistic he is and is like, "I don't want any part of this drama." So good for him. But like I said, really I think it was probably the strongest season, you're right, since season 1.
Yeah.
Even though I had a lot of fun in season 3 with, like, the stuff at the mall and, Robin is also another favorite character of mine, and I'm like, her introduction and, stuff like that was
Yeah,
really good in season 3,
seasons
but
2 and 3 weren't bad.
mhm.
They just season 1 was phenomenal. Like, there's a
Yeah.
reason why that season went, like, for lack of a better word, viral,
Mhm.
right? Like, that season was so big, and this season, the one issue that I have with it really is that it deserves better than the binge format, right? Like, I fully
Mhm.
enjoyed binging it this weekend, I did, but to have how these episodes are structured, if it was 1 a week, where you had to
Mhm.
wait, theorize, and look forward to it, that big reveal at the end of the mid-season finale would have felt so much bigger, and, like, the stuff with Max, where, like, already it has that emotional punch when she's, like, running through trying to get out of the upside
Upside down,
down's,
yeah.
like, mind area, and, like, you see, like, the flashes of her with Lucas and, like, the other kids, and they're so young because the
Yeah.
series is 1, 3 years in between seasons, and it's, like, it's emotional, this pull, and you're like, "Wow, this series just, like, it doesn't pull its punches." It would hit so much harder if
Mhm.
we had to wait for it.
Yeah, yeah, we talked about that last time, coming into, this series, and, you're right. It's a shame that Netflix won't change their ways, but, yeah, it would have more of an emotional impact for sure, but that scene with Max seems to be the, defining moment of the season so far, and it
100%.
for good reason because, everybody killed it in terms of the acting, music great stuff. Yeah, just overall really good. I'm excited to see how they follow up in the second part because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get resolved and yeah, it's going to be a good time and now knowing that the stuff that Elle is dealing with is coupled back into the stuff with Hawkins. I found that a really nice and tidy
Nice.
reveal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Loops
exactly,
everything
like,
together.
loops everything back together in a nice way. That makes sense too, because they foreshadowed that stuff in the one flashback you get with that house and the son, like I was like, why is he not as disfigured as the others? And they also mentioned that like he kind of collapsed instead of being like brutally murdered. So they set up the breadcrumbs nicely, and it only took that final episode for it to all click together. But when it clicked, it made sense. So
yeah, it didn't feel forced. It was very nicely put together.
It was very nicely put together, and merged both sides of that story basically.
One last thing that I'll say about it before we close out is I absolutely love how much Steve Harrington and Eddie like compete for Dustin's admiration and affection. I find it so adorable. Like Steve, this like super cool rich guy who like gets all the ladies. It's like I really want this young nerdy kid to think I'm the coolest. I love it.
That's why they're the best characters. That the group in Hawkins is the best characters, 100%. I love them so much. My only one good things for them, and I swear to God, if anything bad happens to them, I'm coming for you, Netflix. But that is all the time we have for you today on the Crosscheck NHL show. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure to follow us on your podcast platform of choice, from Apple to Odyssey to Spotify and YouTube, and rate and review us while you're at it. You can follow the pod at Crosscheck NHL on Twitter, me at Mary C. Clarke on Twitter, and Andrew at Andrew Berkshire on Twitter. Thanks for making the Crosscheck NHL show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We'll be back on Friday with some more puck talk, but now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.